you made a pyramid from one to everyone, well, that seems to be God, the oneness of God creating itself as everyone here in time. And if you looked below that, like you drew another pyramid inverted and enmeshed with that first pyramid, in other words, like the Star of David configuration, if you saw yourself as the point right at the very bottom, you came from the all that are at the top of that pyramid. And so all of those intermingling fields, no matter where you see yourself in space and time, you've come from the multiplicity of generations that are the one and the everything, you know. And I just sort of, that came to me as just a very simple understanding, you know. I came from the one, which is everything, and I am the one that came from everything. And so are we all intermingling through the fabric of many dimensions and space-time continuums, weaving patterns of communication. And it's a very, very complex, enmeshed involvement that we have in our genetic structure. So I said to myself, even though the genetics are probably distortions of light and sound fields, the vain imaginations stored down as my biological computer, they're probably distortions, because here I am as an image that God did not create. God did not create a man made out of the dust in a state of decay. In God's mind, I'm whole and perfect and wonderful and beautiful and able to transcend the limitations of matter. But here I am apparently stuck in matter, and somehow my consciousness is related to the matter. You know, so we know that, you know, the body is like a projection of the mind. So the mind circumscribes the body in multi-dimensional electrotonal magnetic energy fields of different dimensional frequency bands. In other words, we project the body into space and time because we've got blocked gateways of communication with the higher dimensional mind. So we've got shut gateways, and we've put ourselves into gravity. You know, if we had the open gateways within the atomic structure of our body, we wouldn't be here. But we've projected ourselves into gravity and depravity because of the closed gateways of communication that are in our body-mind computer. And so through the opening of the gateways, recording or recoding our alignment with all of the family of creation, as we see them as the constituent parts of our body in light, the way that God holds them in its mind, if we let those light associations come into reformulation within the constitution of our cellular structure, we would increase the communication on the atomic level, and we would transcend the limitations of the world. So this became a very clear thing to me to do. That's what I wanted to do, you know. I read about it in the Bible. I've seen it in the Course of Miracles. There's a very, very good and clear instruction in the Course of Miracles how consciousness works. But I sort of wanted to expand my understanding of how that worked in a way that would become tangible to me, in a way that I could see, this is how you do it, right? This is how structure is created through, say, for example, the first particle of consciousness. The first particle of consciousness emerging as an expanding entity of consciousness. How does it work? What is it? And I found that the first particle actually held everything that exists. So in minute form, it held the encryption code of all that was going to come forth, or is coming forth, in an infinite capacity. In other words, there's no limit. But it held it within itself, and it itself was, the first particle of consciousness is a perpetual motion generator, which would come and replicate itself. It would hold its own original form, replicate itself, and split into two, and then those two would come back into the center and exit out the other side of the consciousness and replicate again, or express two particles again. So you would actually be creating like a particle and antiparticle universe from this antiparticle. So this antiparticle held the antiparticle and particle components within itself. One that would send out one side of the diaphragm of consciousness and one out the other. And so that we had a particle and antiparticle universe joined in the center of the original one, which is always at the center of consciousness of any expansion of awareness that radiates out from that core point. And it comes into multiplicity and great diversity, myriad form of expression with limitless, unboundless ability to create whatever it wanted to do through its own individual parts. It became sort of like individuated consciousness, God coming forth as everything that is, in space and time and different densities, different matter structures. So as this first particle came forth, it was the constituent parts of, you might say, what we would call morphogenetic fields, or fields of strings of consciousness particles that formed a crystalline structure. And the crystalline structure had many different facets and many different vibratory and oscillatory levels within the fabric. So the fabric would have many multi-dimensional structures through which matter could manifest into space and time, still being connected to the original mind. So we could have an identity that emerged within the structure of space-time and still be fully connected to the original mind, the mind of the Creator, God-mind. And we would be reporting back constantly to the creative energy exactly what we are beholding through our own consciousness evolution. And so here we all are, intermingling fields of light and sound that emerge on a multi-dimensional structure. And it's electrotonal, magnetic electric frequencies of light and sound, expansion and contraction, or oscillation and vibration. So we found that vibration is the potential that is held within a structure of consciousness. So the faster it vibrates, the denser it becomes. The faster it oscillates, the more expanded it becomes. So we found that the fusion generator of the self-perpetuating particle of consciousness, when it expanded out from the center one to the two other parts, when the particle became a particle and a particum, a particle and an antiparticle, that there was actually a fission, like there was actually an oscillation and a release of light, but when it reported back into the original point from which it sprung, it would be a contraction, a vibration, a sound. So we're creating light and sound, electric, magnetic. We're creating many different constituent characteristics from within the very core of expression. And it's going out and reporting back to itself even in greater expansive realms. So that's what I sort of found, that consciousness is constantly reporting back to itself, and that there are many strings of multi-dimensional layers of a morphogenetic field upon which matter constantly and perpetually emerges and folds back into itself, breathing in and out of creation point doorway through the particle and antiparticle universe within our own structure. So we could see ourselves having like an antiparticle reality exactly alongside this particle reality. So the particle reality that we see here in this space and time seems to be made of matter particles, but in the same space-time, exactly in the same location, exists an antiparticle universe of ourselves. So we have particle-antiparticle reporting back to the antiparticle, which would be like the progenitor of life springing into two expressions of itself. But we have a gateway where every expression goes through the central core of creation. And so these antiparticle and particle universes, or even our own body expression, are held exactly in the same space-time and slightly different time cycle, one slightly advanced to the other, but they are both in the same location. In the same location as far as they coexist simultaneously in the same space, but out of range of one another slightly by a different angular rotation of particle spin. So if you can imagine our Earth is rotating on an axis, and everything would rotate, a satellite would rotate around it. An atom would have an axis, and the electrons would flow around the proton, and there's other particles racing around, but they are, how would you say, they are not coinciding with one another. In other words, because they're on different angles of rotation, one is not able to really see the other, although they both act through the same central doorway to communicate.